brothers and sisters. We will not win this fight with guns. It's not going to happen. We got to be peaceful. Earlier today, they were supposed to end our protest. They didn't, okay? They let us rock. We were peaceful all day long. We were peaceful, so they let us keep going. They stand with us.
That was a demonstrator in Atlanta, Georgia, Monday, holding a police megaphone while hand in hand with an officer. The city is one of many that has seen protests for days following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Last week, some protesters threw rocks at police cars and smashed windows at the CNN Center, but the majority of demonstrations were peaceful. Civil rights activists and city officials have been blaming outsiders who they believe hijacked their protests. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, many people out last Friday may not even be Georgia residents. Willoughby Mariano co-wrote that piece. She's an investigative reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Willoughby, thanks very much for being with us. You talked to some of the protesters. Give us a sense of what they saw and what they heard.
There was a lot of anger, despair, outrage, and a lot of also peaceful protest. There are, it's a very close-knit activist community here. People know each other. The police know the activists. City Hall knows the activists. And it was quite a shock and surprise to a number of them when this erupted violently as it did.
Well, you mentioned in your piece that law enforcement and activists alike seem to agree that a number of these protesters were so-called outsiders. Who are these people? Why might they be coming?
Right now, we don't know. Police did say, Chief Erica Shields did say that there are outsiders here. And there is some evidence that a number of protesters from other areas are here based on license plates of cars that were towed after the event. But we don't know for sure. There's been no name of any group that was shared and no clear sense of how this event was supposedly orchestrated. However, I also can tell you that there was evidence, people on the street, protesters, who weren't familiar to a lot of the mainstay activist communities and who didn't seem to know where they were going. Now, what that means, we don't know. Outsiders, as in, were they outsiders to the cause? Were they outsiders simply to the city of Atlanta, or were they literally outsiders from other states? It really depends. And I think we'll know perhaps in the next week or so.
Well, all of this is happening, of course, in the midst of this global coronavirus pandemic, and demonstrators and law enforcement have been seen in close contact without a lot of protective measures in place. Is there a sense that this virus threat, which we know has disproportionately affected African Americans in particular, has taken a back burner due to these protests?
It has absolutely taken a back burner. Now, here in Georgia, we have eased our restrictions, and we've been living under these, new circumstances, an easing of social distancing restrictions for the past month now. So a lot of us had already abandoned our masks and had already resumed some of normal activity. And this has only increased the sort of the disregard, I guess, or the lack of focus on coronavirus. I mean, this is a threat to life and limb that to many Black Atlantans feels far more acute than the prospect of contracting coronavirus, as devastating as the virus has been in Atlanta and Georgia's African American community, which goes to show you exactly how just how existential, I guess, this threat is to a lot of people in the community. This is violence. This is the threat of being killed because you have a knee on your throat. I think for a lot more people, it's easier to understand and much more part of their daily experience than this novel coronavirus has been for the past few months.
Well, rapper Killer Mike gave an emotional speech in Atlanta on Friday. Let's go ahead and listen to some of what he said about focusing on organizing.
So we have an opportunity now, because I'm mad, I don't have any good advice. But what I can tell you is that if you sit in your homes tonight, instead of burning your home to the ground, you will have time to properly plot, plan, strategize and organize and mobilize in an effective way.
So how are protesters planning on moving forward?
Right now, there are not a lot of plans. There is a broad sense that the peaceful protests must continue, but remember that the movement for Black Lives is decentralized. It's decentralized here in Atlanta, in Georgia, much as it is across the rest of the United States. So there is no one single vote. There is no one hierarchical organized structure that has come up with a series of proposals. What I do know, though, as I talk to people involved in the peaceful portion of the protests, is that they do want police reform. There were reforms that were not adapted from several years ago after the killings of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling in 2016 that were never adopted here in the city of Atlanta. They want a chance at police accountability, and there is a possibility now with this violence that somehow those reforms will be reached, but it remains very unclear. And again, because there is no centralized authority and no single consensus on what needs to be done, it is going to take a lot of work, a lot of coordination, and a lot of trust building for any steps forward to be taken.
Very much a tall order right now. Willoughby Mariano for us. Willoughby, thank you very much.
Thank you.